Hey, Andrea.
Hey, Beth. How are you doing today?
Good. So I felt dumb, and I have to admit it. It's related to being smart about what we're reading online. So all week, my husband and I have been following Elon Musk and buying out Twitter, and it's just been super interesting to us. We've always thought Elon Musk was interesting, obviously, because I spend so much time working on social media. I think it's interesting to watch where this is going. A few weeks ago, Elon Musk had said he wanted to start his own social media platform. I thought, okay, we'll see where that goes with his perspective. But the trend recently of starting new social media hasn't really launched the way the brand names have launched. So it was just really interesting. We kept watching it. I watched a lot of CNBC the other day when the deal was happening and what it all meant. So I knew in my mind that this wasn't going to be an overnight thing, right? Like they were waiting for the stock to close to actually know the price and to know everything. But the business and the legal side of it, he doesn't take control of it for a while. I knew this, but yesterday I was scrolling through Google News to read different headlines from all over. And I saw one headline that said, Musk deletes every Twitter user other than himself. And I read the article and it said it quoted him and it seemed legitimate. I did not look at what source this was coming from. All day I believed it, all day.
Oh,
I felt so dumb. We were getting dressed this morning and my husband showed me something on Twitter and I said, how do you still have your account? He just died laughing. He goes, okay, I have been a victim of fake news.
hashtag fake news.
I should have known better, but it was just something I was so interested in. I think the day it was happening, I read so many of those headlines. Of course, that's what was coming up in my algorithm. So that came through.
I know. What a good lesson, though, and a good reminder. We talk about it all the time to teach our kids and students about the legitimacy of their news and the sources that they're seeing. You're not above falling for it.
None of us are. And I may have continued thinking that. And we could have come on the podcast today and I would have said Twitter shut down and I would have been crazy. So I think it's not just reading the news, but talking to people about it, finding legitimacy of it. We can't be isolated in our bubbles and just rely on electronic news to tell us everything. We have to have a community. We have to talk to each other, I think is really the best thing to keep us all on the right track.
And I think it's learning that as well. Like what you hear may not be real, but before you share it or before you tell
Retweet
10
it,
people or hit that share button on social media, you make sure it is true because that's how it all spreads and it spreads so fast. And then misinformation just goes everywhere.
So I did fact check it and he does not officially own Twitter yet, so he could not make that call yet.
I'm pretty sure I have a Twitter account still.
I think maybe this will be my motivation to create one. I don't know if I will follow Elon Musk like so many people do because he has a huge following on Twitter, but I like the idea of picking what news sources I want my news from and getting those snapshots. And what I have found in that app that I use for news right now, I can't select individual news and only get it from those sources. So maybe this is my chance to get on Twitter and read because you don't have to be active to be on Twitter.
No, I don't think I've ever sent out a tweet, but I do follow a bunch of different news sources and some interesting, fun stuff as well. But I do think it's a good place to get good information.
So hopefully I will pick up on Twitter credible sources and having fun.
It's a good mix.
One thing that made us really interested in following the deal was how is he going to operate Twitter? Is it going to be as a social media company making money, or is it going to be as a public utility in sharing information freely? And the way he talks about it and the reasons for buying Twitter, it sounds more like on the side of public utility and a news source. I think this will be a very good example for other social media companies of what social media can do. I think some of them are just so big at this point that they're reacting to so many things versus being proactive.
It's interesting because they've been around. When my son was born almost 13 years ago, we lived far away from our family. He had a BlackBerry back in the day, and he tweeted out like the progress, not like second by second, got to the hospital, checked in, water broke, different things like that. It was really fun. But when I think of Twitter, I always think of my husband tweeting out Alexander's like,
awesome. That's a good story. So I looked it up and it says it started in 2006. Do you know what the little bird's name is? We learned this from a little card game that we had. It was from like a Wendy's kids meal that we got on a road trip or something, that it was these parents versus kids quiz game.
Hmm.
And that was one of the questions, is what is the Twitter bird's name? And it's Larry, based from Larry Bird, because the people that started Twitter were from Boston. And at that point, Bird was Larry Bird from the Boston Celtics. And
That's
so
awesome.
they loved the bird image. They bought it. I think I read they bought it for $15 to use the image from a clip art site. It was the company joke that the bird was Larry, but we all know.
That's fantastic. I'll have to share that. Maybe I should fact check it first.
Okay, go ahead. We will fact check each other. That's what we're here for.
That's right.
You're listening to the smartsocial.com podcast. Each week, we help parents and educators keep students safe on social media so they can someday shine online. Make sure you join our newsletter to get the most up-to-date social media alerts at smartsocial.com/newsletter. Every Tuesday and Thursday, we send out the latest social media app resources that help parents and educators to navigate this challenging landscape with their students. Now let's get to the program.
Okay, so Beth, I know that you've been doing a ton of work over the last couple of weeks, updating one of our biggest resources and one of the most important ones to parents and students. Why don't you tell us all about your Snapchat updates?
Yes. So we have updated our Snapchat guide for parents, students, and teachers.
Mm-hmm.
So we have had this guide for a while now, and it's just time to update it. So we spent a lot of time just going through every single screen on Snapchat, everything that we can tap on, click on, swipe left, swipe up, swipe down, swipe, do a circle. We did everything that we could possibly find in this app. But the other thing that I really appreciate, and that I think hopefully parents will appreciate too, is that we talk to students about how they are using it. And last week we had the chance to talk with our student advisors in a live Zoom with them. And these are high school kids from across the country that have volunteered to give us an inside look of how they are using social media. And it was really interesting to hear how some of them use Snapchat. A lot of them said, I feel guilty that I wasted my time and I should have been studying, or I should have been on this project or practicing my sport. So it's just interesting to hear how they use it and their perspective of how their friends use it. So we include some of their quotes in our Snapchat guide online that is now available for everybody for the next week. That will be free. After that, we'll lock it down for just our VIP members to access. We break it down. Our very first video, which is new for our format this time, is a real quick run through of what the top dangers are. So I thought maybe we could talk about how we define the top dangers of Snapchat. So some of this comes from our own experiences in doing the research, what we saw. Some of it comes from news headlines and what we see the dangers are of how kids have actually been impacted by some of these dangers. A lot of it has just come from research and what everybody in general says, but we try to break it down to give parents an idea of what the dangers are. And we try to give parents and students tips of how to avoid those dangers and still have fun, because kids just want to have fun on Snapchat.
There's a lot of like fun elements to it. There really are.
Yes, my screen time this week is pretty high compared to my normal screen time. And that bar for Snapchat is way high. It's not something I'm normally on, but I will say, even just messaging with you over the week, we started playing a game to try it out for work. And then I was like, oh, I really do want to play that game. I wonder how I could do that. It gets in our brains. And that's how it's designed, is to make us interested, but yet give us that social connection with other people at the same time.
Definitely. You would send me something and I would look it up to check like how the function worked. And before I knew it, I was like scrolling through it thinking, oh, this is really fun. This is interesting. And then I'd be like, stop, you have to work.
Exactly. It's all for the good of work. I love using the photo filters. That is just so much fun to me. I sent you one that I think you responded and said, that doesn't look like you at all. So I know, but it was me. So what I did, I can edit photos. No, I can use a filter. So the top number one danger of Snapchat that we want all parents to know about and we want kids to know about is about predators. And this one really hit home a couple weeks ago when I went to that presentation from the FBI, that this is what that division of our local FBI does, is look for predators on social media. When our kids say they want Snapchat, we have to have the discussion with them about not talking to strangers. That has to be the number one rule. People online are not who they always say they are. So even if you think you know who that person is, it's always good to fact check, right? Going back to this idea of double checking because we just don't know what we're seeing online, if it's true or not. In our guide, one of the tips we gave is to have different ways to communicate with your friends. So if your group has a friend chat on Snapchat, just knowing a cell phone number or connecting with them on a different social media network or an email address. School emails addresses are pretty popular right now. Just having another way to communicate with them to do that fact check if something doesn't seem right. We have to teach our kids to trust their gut and to have a safe way to trust that. And so number 2, very closely to predators, is about bullying. And we hear a lot about that from our teachers and from the schools that partner with Smart Social. The problem of these disappearing messages is there's no proof to somebody else that anything ever happened or who posted what or who said what. There is proof in that a lot of kids get their feelings hurt. A lot of times, sometimes it goes even farther than just feelings hurt. We share some of the news headlines that are just devastating to some kids of what they read or what they saw about themselves on Snapchat. So we have to just overall have discussions with our kids about bullying, that what you say online hurts as much as what you say in person. I think the other one that is really surprising to me about Snapchat is how easily accessible drugs can be. Illegal drugs, like scary fentanyl drugs that we're hearing about. The new pandemic across the country is these illegal drugs. And that is just so scaring to me that whether our kids are looking for it or not, it's there and it's very easily accessible. We list a whole bunch of ways from the experts in mental health and substance abuse of how to talk to your kids about drugs. So it may not be a conversation about Snapchat, it's a conversation about drugs, and that you care about your kids and you don't want them to go down that path.
Because it's not just on Snapchat. You can find drugs on pretty much all of the different social media sites.
Yeah. And then 2 more round out the overall thoughts of Snapchat is that we know that there's some mental health concerns of how addictive it can be. And with that, how screen time addiction, how Snapchat and the way the app works, especially with snap streaks or these games, just trying to get us back and trying to get us to want to open it and check it all the time and post all the time. We talked about Twitter. You don't have to post to be on Twitter. You don't have to post to be on Snapchat, but that's really what it's driving, is they want you to make cool photos or make chats or have discussions with other people. It's really, Snapchat drives users to be active in the way they use it.
To me, I have a hard time with Snapchat because I just don't see any good that can come from disappearing messages. And honestly, when I first heard about Snapchat, I heard about sexting. That was like a new word to me. And that's what I thought Snapchat was. I was like, oh yeah, that's that sexting app. That's all kids use it for, is to send pictures of their privates to other kids. Right?
I think Instagram has, other social media have, but in general, we have to teach our kids to respect themselves first. And if you're feeling bullied or you're feeling pressured, that's probably a sign that it's not the right thing to do. That if you say no and they keep pushing it, that's a really good indication it's not the right thing to do for you. When we hand these phones and hand these apps over to our kids, we have to trust that they can make those good decisions. And every family has to make that decision for themselves. Disappearing messages makes me confused a little bit. So we heard from our student advisors that some of their teams or their clubs will use Snapchat to communicate with each other. So they'll create a group chat to talk about when's the next practice or what do we need to work on or bring this tomorrow. But then the messages disappear. So how is that useful? Because in my mind, cell phones have made me dumber, that I have to look back at everything. I don't remember as much as I used to because I know I can fall back on it.
It's like writing it down.
It's there for me. I know I don't have to then write it down. I kind of wonder, I would love to hear from our advisors again. A follow-up question after I thought about it more is, how do disappearing messages affect your communication? Are you remembering things? Is this creating those pathways that I have lost because of my cell phone? Or are you writing it down? Did you just create your own time management and practice of that skill? Maybe there's a good thing about disappearing messages.
Yeah, that would be pretty impressive. And I think that'd be great if kids could start doing that. Because you're right. I don't know how often I go back through my text message chain and think, oh, I know it was in there somewhere.
Yeah, I know it's just always there. So I don't know. Like, I'm curious how kids remember things if that message disappears.
That would be a great byproduct, I feel like, of the disappearing message.
And that at Smart Social is what we want to help kids and parents identify, are these good products of social media. So if there is a benefit to disappearing messages, I would love to believe that this is one of them. One thing that we added to our course and our information is about My Eyes Only, that you can select images to save in memories in Snapchat. So it creates that history that you can go back and look at it without it disappearing. Within that screen, you can swipe to My Eyes only. And if you set it up, you can only access that with a pin. So if parents don't know to swipe to My Eyes only, and then they don't know that pin, they may not know what kids are hiding. That was a big eye opener to me.
I feel like Snapchat was invented by a very sneaky teenager.
Snapchat says we are a camera company. They don't call themselves social media. They call themselves a camera company.
And I get that. The filters are very cool and it definitely encourages you to take pictures. I just can't wrap my head around the disappearing messages.
I think there's good ideas behind really a lot of these social media apps and companies, but as they have evolved and ballooned, they have added these questionable pieces. That's really what we are raising concerns about for parents.
There's a lot concerning about Snapchat, but it is a really fun app to be on. So it is not all bad.
Not all bad, but lots of different tips that parents really need to know if your kids are already on Snapchat or if they're asking for it. If they come to you and say, my golf team wants to create a group chat on Snapchat, can I join? Our first recommendation would be to watch this course with your kids so that you see exactly what that's going to entail, because for most kids, the temptation to use the filters or to watch the Discover tab is going to be much greater than just sticking with that group chat.
Are there any parental controls? So can you, as a parent, block the Snapmap feature or the disappearing messages to where your students or kids are only using the camera function?
There are not parental controls that parents are driving or parents can lock down. There are controls within each user's login to turn off Snapmap and to turn off how long things save or not save, or there are some ways to lock down the app, but it's on the student's account. So they could go in at any time and change it.
Okay.
So I have heard from parents that some of the parental monitoring apps that say they monitor every app out there don't always catch those disappearing messages. So even that is sometimes a little challenging, that parents think that they're seeing everything. It's almost like a false sense of confidence that if you're only relying on parental monitoring apps, you may not be doing the physical look yourself or having that conversation frequently enough with your kids to actually know what's going on. I think parental monitoring can be useful, but just knowing the flaws, and especially with disappearing messages, we have to layer our approach to parenting with social media.
Those are some really good tips. Thank you so much. This is like a really in-depth look at Snapchat. So I highly recommend anyone whose kid is thinking about using it, check it out.
And we would love feedback. If you have a story about how your kid has used Snapchat successfully, we would love to share more good stories. If you have had a story of maybe somebody at your school or a friend or your own kid that's had some trouble on Snapchat and how it's impacted them and how you help them work through it, we would love to hear those stories too, and maybe share some of our tips with you. So just go to smartsocial.com/contact and you can always reach out to us and share your story. All right. So what are you working on for next week now that we're wrapping up Snapchat?
Yes, moving on, because there's always something to look at and to research and to tell people about. But we've been looking at how to protect your family against cyber attacks. We're putting together an expert blog page. So we have, I believe, 16 different expert tips on how to protect your family from cyber attack, because it's not something you really want to think about. It's not exciting or fun, but it's real. So it's a real threat.
Our school district shut down a couple months ago for a cyber attack on the school district. It happens. I heard about another one in Colorado from a small district that happened, I think this week. It's happening at companies and it's happening at organizations. They have people who are very trained in this to help them recover and hopefully help them protect themselves in the future. But parents may not have that kind of knowledge or those kind of resources. I really like where we're going with these tips. We got some really good experts and we've gone back to a couple of them to expand on their ideas. So we're really looking at these ideas, not just of tell your family about phishing. We really want to define what that is, what it might look like on your kid's device or on your device, and explaining what to talk to them about.
Yeah. I think there's some obvious advice in there that maybe you forget about, but you're like, oh yeah, that makes total sense. Just some really out of the box ideas that I would have never landed on myself. It's coming together really nicely.
Awesome. And that's why we try to get so many different experts in these expert blogs that we have, is to get different perspectives of how to keep ourselves safe and our family safe. So if tip number 1 doesn't work for you, keep reading and look at number 2, or keep following down and find something that does work for your family.
So you're working on something kind of fun coming up.
Yes. So we talked about it briefly last week, that we had a question from one of our partner schools about virtual reality. We are working on the parent guide to virtual reality and what parents need to know either before, or if they have already handed over that device to their kids, what they need to talk to their kids about. It is good to know of what kids are seeing, because we don't see what they see through those headsets. Having an idea of more than just what they're seeing, but what that means and what they're hearing is a big thing. I'm really excited about this, that it's brand new for us. It's brand new in the world. It's really developing, and it's going to be a resource that we continue adding on for years. All right. So if you have any questions, comments, let us know. We would love to hear from you, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening to the smartsocial.com podcast with this week's topics from Beth and Andrea. If you enjoyed the Mom Talk discussion that we had today about all things social media from a mom's perspective, we invite you to join the smartsocial.com VIP program. As a very informed parent VIP member, you will learn about the dangers and benefits of social media for your kids and get tips every week to keep your family safe online, and most importantly, to teach your students how to shine online. We have over 130 detailed app guides that cover apps like TikTok, Snapchat, Instagram, and 100 plus apps you might not have heard of, but your students may have visited or downloaded. Find out more and join today at smartsocial.com/VIP. Please remember to rate, subscribe, and review so we can continue to help more parents and educators just like you. I'm your host, Josh Oakes. As always, remember to keep it light, bright, and polite. We'll see you on the next episode. Have a great day.